That sounds like a very ambitious and comprehensive agenda, both to inject a bit more dynamism and innovation into the economy, while also seeking social protection, as you say, to address those that might be left behind, which raises the question of the labor market, which has been a very controversial and topical issue among Koreans. New entrants, graduates into the labor market often say they struggle to find jobs. What is the government doing to address those challenges? And has the increase in the minimum wage, which has been very substantial last year and again this year, 16+% last year, another 10, 11% this year, is that one of the reasons the job market's been so weak?
예, 지금 일자리 창출은
Yes, job creation is a priority for the President Moon administration. The government is also concentrating its policy capacity to create jobs. However, employment conditions in recent years are very difficult due to the structural factors of the Korean economy, the cyclical factor, and particularly the demographic factor. A mix of all these factors have led to very difficult employment conditions. In January this year, the government proposed an employment target of about 150,000 new jobs this year. However, in January, there was only an increase of about 19,000 people employed. 263,000 were newly employed in February and 250,000 in March. We can see some improvements lately. However, overall employment in manufacturing has been declining, especially the rate of increase in employment of the 30s and 40s, who normally should be actively working, has been declining. The government takes this employment issue very seriously. The government believes that the best jobs are created in the private sector. But in addition to that, the government is also providing financial support for jobs. I can tell you the government's measures in three major directions, from the demand and the supply side of the labor market and the labor market itself. On the demand side, the government is focused on boosting private investment and private businesses to create added value and jobs. In addition, the government is providing financial support for employment in areas that are difficult for the private sector to serve, but which are essential. In particular, jobs for women or seniors will be a good example. The number of jobs for the elderly was 510,000 last year, and we are financially supporting 620,000 jobs this year. The second is the supply side of labor. For those displaced from the labor market and for those who need job training to increase their abilities, the government is focused on enhancing skills by providing job and educational training. In particular, the government is focused on providing customized support for women, new middle age, and the elderly. In terms of labor market, there are two issues. One can be regarded as a Korean characteristic. Mismatch in the labor market is very serious. In SMEs, people are scarce, while the youth have no jobs. To resolve such mismatches, we are strengthening things like intermediary job matching for various jobs. The second is to reform the labor market itself. The government is working hard to alleviate the wage gap and to increase flexibility of the working hours as part of structurally reforming the labor market. As I mentioned earlier, the minimum wage increased by 16.3% last year and 10.9% this year. In fact, the minimum wage has been a well-intentioned attempt to alleviate polarization or the wage disparity as a result of the very fast growth experienced during our development phase. However, it seems that the rate of minimum wage increase was faster than expected by market. So, because of this, it seems that the minimum wage hike has had both positive effects and some negative effects. If I can mention two positive impacts, nominal wage growth rate of workers has increased tremendously. The nominal wage increase rate was 3% in 2017, but it increased by 5.3% last year. And the share of low-wage workers shows that it has reduced from 23% in 2016 and 22% in 2017, and then to 18% last year, indicating that the minimum wage had achieved some goals. Since the minimum wage increase was so rapid, businesses that are very sensitive to minimum wage, such as food and lodging, were impacted by the sharp rise in minimum wage. In particular, small businesses that do not have sufficient capacity to absorb the minimum wage increase have complained about the increased burden. The government created a job stabilization fund worth 3 trillion won and is supporting small and medium-sized businesses facing difficulties. In particular, the government is resolving these difficulties by supporting such small businesses through special management support measures. The most desirable way to solve this minimum wage problem is, as I thought when I took office as Deputy Prime Minister, that the decision structure of setting the minimum wage needed to be changed. I thought that the process where sharp increase in minimum wage could happen needed improvement. The Minimum Wage Commission will be reorganized into the Range Setting Commission, composed of 9 civilian experts, which will decide the range for a reasonable minimum wage, and the Final Wage Decision Commission, which will determine the minimum wage within the proposed wage bracket. This dual structure will enable a more reasonable and market-agreeable decision. Legislation is now underway in the National Assembly for the government-proposed reform.
Okay, thank you very much. One final area of the reform agenda that we would like your view on is the role of Chaebol, or conglomerates, in the Korean economy. This has been a very topical issue since the previous administration of President Park. And we'd like to know what steps the government is taking to improve governance of the Chaebol and how this affects the ties between government and the Chaebol going forward.
Yes, as you know, chaebols have contributed a lot during the development phase of the Korean economy. However, on the other side, various problems have been exposed, such as concentration of economic power and unfair practices. President Moon's administration is strongly pursuing corporate governance reform to enhance corporate transparency, accountability, and efficiency of large corporations included in the fair economy, which is a part of the economic policy framework of the administration. For example, we are restructuring the cross-shareholding structure of large corporations to prevent arbitrary control by large corporations. 2 years ago, there were 93 circular shareholding rings. When I checked the numbers last month, it reduced to about 5. As such, we have focused on improving the structure of arbitrary control. Another is to reform the system so that shareholders' rights are exercised properly. For example, introducing electronic voting system, or introducing multiple derivative lawsuits, or reducing the number of circular cross-sharing rings, as mentioned before. or strengthening regulations. We are pursuing such frameworks of a fair economy. There are some which have already been introduced, and most of the reform contents have been reflected in the revision of the Commercial Law and the Fair Trade Act, which have currently been submitted to the National Assembly. The Korean government will continue to encourage corporations to voluntarily improve corporate governance, and the government will make every effort to establish a fair competition environment. In fact, in addition to the corporate governance reform, ways for SMEs and large corporations to coexist, the improvement of unfair practices in the economy, and consumer protection policies are included in the fair economy. I think that these 4 pillars will help create a fair economy, and these will be strongly implemented.
Okay, well, Minister, as Minister of the Economy and Finance, you have your plate full with challenges on the external front and on the domestic front with jobs and the Chaebol reform, not to mention the relationship with North Korea. It's an ambitious agenda. We wish you all the success. Again, on behalf of Fitch Ratings, I would like to thank you for your time today and for your very comprehensive replies to our questions. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you.
Thank you.